edu team stuck in there. I never said editing. We're not going to talk about document editing. If you're here to find out anything more about XML to RFC or NROF or any of that stuff, go somewhere else. But if you're here to talk about document shepherding, that's what this is. So let's get started. RFC 4858 is the RFC that started off the whole document shepherding thing. The title of it is Document Shepherding from Working Group Last Call to Publication, and you notice it starts at Working Group Last Call. It shifts work. The purpose of it is to shift work from the responsible AD who had to do all this checking to someone who has been following the working group and has some idea of the document's history and can take some of this work off of the responsible AD and coordinate with the working group on it. In addition, it provides another set of eyes. It's always good to have yet one more person who's responsible for doing a thorough review of the document. So it started off with working group chairs and secretaries. I think the document says that it's going to be a working group chair or a secretary. But there's an IESG statement about non-working group chair shepherds, and it actually encourages the use of that. So we've moved towards sometimes using other volunteers as shepherds, and still the chairs are the ones who appoint it. Specifically, I've got a couple of quotes here from the document shepherding document, the RFC 4858. I'm not going to read them to you, but basically it tells you what the the objective of this is, and sets up the document shepherd write-up. Most document shepherds are most familiar with the document shepherd write-up. You have some questions to answer, or in the new version that I like, because I composed it, I call it the essay version, where you just fill in 4 sections and just tell me what's different about this document, what's notable about this document. That's mostly what the shepherds think they're doing. The shepherd really needs to be an active part of this. So the point here is that the shepherd must keep the document moving forward, communicating about it, following the discussion that's going on, and checking what's happening with the document at all times. The shepherd is supposed to be checking back with the working group as well and making sure the working group still has consensus on the changes that are being made throughout the process. So the shepherd is basically the leader for this document and interfacing with the working group. Here are some tasks this is actually also a quote from 4858, the bullets here. Providing the document shepherd write-up, during AD evaluation, managing the discussion, during IETF last call, following up on feedback, during IESG evaluation, following up on feedback and the discuss and comment ballots that the IESG puts in. In general, keep following up and keep the working group in the loop. So I proposed some time ago what I call extended document shepherding. And what I mean by that is starting earlier in the process and really focusing on being an active shepherd. It started off as an internet draft that I was putting through. I started off having it, this is my opinion, and people didn't like that. We shouldn't be publishing people's opinions in the IETF stream. So I said, all right, I'll send it through the independent stream. And now the IETF process stuff shouldn't go through the independent stream. So then I went and put it through as a proposal for IETF consensus, and it kind of petered out. It's now in the working group chairs wiki. So it's a place here. You are all, if you're chairs, you all have access to the working group chairs wiki and can tweak it. Actually, I'm not sure. I don't know if it's restricted to chairs. I think it might be that anybody with a wiki ID can edit it. But anyway, so if anybody here who's allowed to edit this document, this page, has ideas on how to change it, you should do that. You're empowered. But what this document does is sets out a timeline, and it says starting with when the working group first starts to discuss the document. That's really when the working group cares about it. And it sets out stages in the document's lifestyle, a few of which are before working group last call. And it sets out what shepherding tasks could be done at each stage in the document's life cycle, following through with calls for adoption and with discussion that goes on in the working group, making sure that there's somebody, when someone in the working group makes comments, reviews the document and makes comments, the comments don't just sit there. There are responses for them. There's an iteration of the draft that goes through. When there's no revision of the draft for 4 months, that's a failure, right? The Shepherd should be keeping track of this. And I should say it's not always a failure. The working group may have intentionally set this one on a back burner for a while. The point is that the Shepherd should be responsible at the early stages for making sure the document doesn't languish. If the working group means to progress this document now, the Shepherd should be making sure the working group is working on it and progressing the document now. What's there in the wiki now are my suggestions. As I said, feel free to add your own to tweak it. But the reason this is extended is, first of all, it emphasizes the depth and follow-up and making sure that it's not just about doing the Shepherd write-up so you can send this to the IESG. It's actually actively following the document. It starts off by encouraging, making a stronger push toward using non-chair Shepherds, not just to offload work from the AD, but to offload work from busy Shepherds to give other people an opportunity to participate at a higher level in the working group and perhaps, busy chairs. Thank you. To give people a chance to start doing some chair-related jobs and prepare themselves to be chairs, that sort of thing. And it starts earlier. It gets somebody involved. The idea here is as soon as the working group starts discussing a document, if this suits the chair's view of how this working group operates, appoint a Shepherd then and have the Shepherd follow the document through all the stages in the life cycle. And of course, it's suggestions. This is all flexibility. You still run your working group the way you're going to run your working group. You are still, the chairs are still ultimately responsible for doing the chair jobs, but you have now somebody assisting you per document to make sure that there's someone following each document that the working group is currently working on. So here's the stages that I outlined, and we can argue about exactly which ones are stages and which ones aren't. That's how I called them. Call for adoption, working group is working on the document, working group last call. So the 4858 starts here, and this just seems like a little bit. We've had a lot of suggestions within the IESG for, well, let's tweak something here in our process so we can save a couple of weeks in IESG processing on the document. That doesn't shorten the document's life cycle by much. This stage here, working group document, usually takes up most of the document's life. That can be anywhere from 6 months to 12 months to, we've seen, 6 years, 8 years for some documents. I think we can eliminate the 6 years and 8 years if we have active shepherding. I hope we can get more documents out of the working group sooner if somebody is following up on everything that needs to happen and pushing the working group and pushing the document authors to get things done. That's my hope. So here are some of the examples of what the document on the wiki does is for each stage in the life cycle, it lays out some tasks that I think the Shepherds should be doing at that stage. And so here are some examples. In IETF last call, monitor the last call comments, make sure that specifically requested reviews arrive. So there's one that the Shepherd write-up says, what reviews do you think are needed for this document? If you've asked for some, some reviewers may need to be prodded for those. Make sure the document editors respond to the reviews. We often see directorate reviews or specifically requested reviews come in and there's no response to them and no changes are made based on them. That's the Shepherd's supposed to be watching for that. Keep the dialogue going, making sure the issues are dealt with, and seeing to it that all of this comes back to the working group, and the working group is aware of what changes are being requested and agrees with them. And that's a really important thing you're going to see at every stage of this. This is IESG evaluation, and you see the last bullet is pretty much the same. We've had a lot of questions about what changes happen to a document after it leaves the working group, and whether the working group still agrees with what the document says after all those changes are made. And I never want to hear anybody say, the AD made me change this. That may or may not happen, but regardless of whether it does, the working group should be aware of that and should still agree with the document. And if you made a change to make an AD happy and the working group is now not happy, we also have a failure, and that needs to be fixed. So in IESG evaluation, keeping track of the discussed positions especially, but also the non-discussed comments, making sure that everything's addressed and making sure the discusses are all resolved, and keeping everybody engaged in the discussion. So, point here, again, I'll say again, have someone responsible for overseeing the document throughout the life cycle and doing what needs to be done to make progress. Nudging authors, nudging reviewers, nudging chairs, nudging ADs, nudging everybody, all the way from the initial presentation to the working group to the RFC publication. The RFC publication, which includes after we're done, after the ISG's approved it, you've still got Auth 48. And Stephen Farrell brought up a question today because there have been a series of documents that have had quite a lot of discussion during Auth 48 to the tune of dozens of messages between the authors and the RFC editor. And that sort of stuff is often missed. We make subtle changes there that working groups might not even be aware of that happened way after the document went to the RFC editor. Can I give an example? I can give some, I know we've had some internationalization issues come up in some documents where there's been a lot of discussion about exactly how something's not quite right, exactly how do we resolve it. And for those I know, we took it back to the working group and we said, here's what came up during Auth 48. Does anybody have any questions or comments about this? And in that case, it all went smoothly. But I can't quote documents. I don't have them in my head. Pete, do you remember anything in particular while I'm continuing? That was during Auth 48? Oh, okay. Well, that's, I thought I had to discuss on that, and that was during the discussion. But that was still during IESG evaluations. Oh, right. Yes. So in Weirds, which was, do you know what Weirds is? Other people might not. It set up a protocol for replacing the Whois protocol. And it involved having a registry, a new registry that IANA had to keep up in a strange way. It's not a typical IANA registry where a document says put this in the registry. The registry was built from stuff that registrars sent in. And so we had a lot of tweaking of that during IESG evaluation, but then when IANA actually went to create the registry after approval, there were some more issues that came up, and we had to go do more tweaking. And again, we let the working group know what was happening, and nobody commented. So, and for those stages, we usually accept that no comment means you agree. At other stages in the document's life cycle, you may want a few people explicitly saying, yes, that looks good to me, I've checked it over and it looks good. And all of that is responsibility of the chairs to decide how they're going to handle those situations. But yeah, and so the last thing here, chairs still manage their working groups. This whole thing is, if what I'm suggesting here is appropriate for your working group, chairs still manage their working groups and chairs still have the responsibility for doing the chair things, for deciding what consensus is. A document shepherd might say, looks to me like there's consensus in this direction. And the chair has to review that recommendation and make the decision that, yes, indeed, that's what I see the consensus as too. So don't fall into that trap of shifting too much to the shepherds. And thank you in 37 languages, I believe, or maybe it's 34. Anyway. All right, so I'll leave it on this slide, and I'd like to open it up to questions. How many of you are chairs? Okay, so we got about half the room, maybe a third of the room. How many of you who are not chairs have shepherded documents? A few. How many of you would like to shepherd documents? Oh, cool. We actually have one. This is one of those. There you go. Anybody who wants to, I wouldn't belong to a club that would have me as a member. So I'm curious then, of those of you who have not shepherded documents and who do not want to shepherd documents, what interested you about this session? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you'd like to say, I'm interested. Sure, go to the mic. I don't know whether this is being recorded, but in case it is, let's use the mic.
So it's not that I have never shepherded a document, but I just became a chair, and so I know I'm going to be a shepherd. I am now a shepherd for a document. I just don't know how to do it yet. I came to find out.
Okay. So I'll tell you that the two things that I most want a shepherd to do that often don't get done, or don't get done properly. One is a really useful shepherd write-up. And it's why I tried to shift it to the essay-style shepherd write-up. And that seems to have worked, although a lot of people don't really like that format. They're used to the question and answer. Here are 12 questions or 18 questions or however many there are. Answer each one. And you see a lot of them just yes, yes, no, no, yes. That's not terribly useful. What I want to see when I'm reading the write-up is tell me about what happened to this document in the working group. And the questions that just have yes, no answers, if yes or no is the normal answer for that question, I don't need to see it. And so the Shepard write-up, the essay version, says, tell me a little bit about the technical aspect of the document. Tell me a little bit about what happened to this document in the working group and what kinds of discussions were notable. And were there any controversies here? Is there anything we ought to be aware of so we don't ask the same questions over again? And so we get some idea of how the consensus developed. And Pete has something to say.
So let me give you a good example of this. The first question on the list is, what is the status of this document? Why? And 99 times out of 100, the answer is proposed standard. Okay. Why was the question asked by the IASG or by the AD or whoever is asking this question? Because the IASG during discussion is going to argue about it, right? If the answer
a little less now that Pete's off the IASG.
Yeah, but if the answer to the question is it's proposed standard because we don't really care, even saying we don't really care is a good answer because that allows the IASG to say, you know what, they said it was proposed standard, but they really don't care, so let's just make it informational, or vice versa. If the answer was, we absolutely want this to be a BCP because we wanted it to have musts and shoulds, and we can't do that in an informational document, you might get a different answer from the IASG. Assume that the reason the question is being asked is because it's going to be argued about, and so give an explanation for, okay, if these bozos on the IASG argue about this, here's why we did it that way, or here's what the answer is. Same thing with the IPR question. Have all of the authors acknowledged that the IPR. Assume that someone's going to say, wait a minute, I thought that there was an IPR disclosure about this, or there should have been. Did you actually check? And if the answer is simply, no one made any reports of IPR, but there's no reason to believe there's any IPR, that gives the IASG something to chew on. So the longer explanations are actually helpful.
And yeah, so I'll drop a name or two here and there, and at the risk of embarrassing a good shepherd. But for instance, Karen O'Donoghue did a write-up recently that said, in answer to that question Pete just brought up, proposed standard. But the working group is ambivalent about that. We considered informational. Here's what we discussed. We settled on proposed standard. Now, if the IASG starts to discuss that, we can say, well, go look at the write-up, and Karen's told us some little bit about what the conversation was, and we have some place to start with. I've had some Shepard write-ups that answer some of the questions that I started having as soon as I started looking at the document. The Shepherd write-up tells me the answer to that question. I don't have to go make a comment in my ballot or put a discuss on it. I already have the answer. That's cool. And then the essay version has this little checklist at the end where all the yes/no questions are accumulated, and you can just go through them and say, yeah, nothing to say. No, oh, wait, this one I should say something about. The idea of the new version is only tell me what's different, only tell me what's notable about this document. So I certainly encourage the Shepherds to use that, but check with your AD, make sure your AD is happy with that. Some of the ADs aren't crazy about it, which is why we did not change the Shepherd write-up. We just gave the two versions as options. Hi.
Hi, my name is Debbie Cooley. I'm from NSA. I have a question. What's the role of the Shepherd in the case of an independent?
That's a good question. This is only talking about working groups, and 4858 only talks about working groups. The IESG statement, I don't remember whether it mentions individual submission. I think she meant individual submissions.
Not for a working group.
Yeah, so individual submissions. And
Okay.
What we generally have been doing is trying to find somebody to be a shepherd for the individual submission. It also offloads the job of watching everything happen and making sure everything gets followed up from the AD. It also gives another check, another set of eyes on a document that probably hasn't gotten as much review as it should have. I know Pete is really against doing protocol work as AD-sponsored documents because they don't get very much review as working group documents.
That's great,
do.
but in this case, the working groups can just ban things.
Yeah, and that's often why we do that. And sometimes the AD will just say, "I'm closing the working group. Send the documents to me as individual submissions." So yeah, we're still encouraging ADs to find shepherds for them, but it's up to the AD. The AD may or may not choose to.
So the AD chooses the shepherd?
Yes.
Or I see.
The AD may ask the author to find a shepherd for them, which I've done a few times. But
Right. Okay, thank you.
you're welcome. Shepherd write-up. I think I'm. So there was the other thing. The author approaches an AD and says, I have this document. It seems to fit in your area. Would you shepherd it for me? And the AD can say, sure, or the AD can say, no, but go check with this AD. Or the AD can say, it's unlikely that any AD is going to pick this one up, and I'm certainly going to recommend to them that they don't. So that has happened. Anyway, so there were two things that I had that could make I would like to see shepherds do better. That's one of them. And I often, in my comments in IESG evaluation, I will often point out a particularly good shepherd write-up and thank the shepherd in my comments for it, because I think it's important to say good things as well as bad ones. Dave.
If you have some shepherd examples, write-ups that are examples that you like a lot, they should be somewhere where you can point people to as training for shepherds.
I like that idea. I can go look through my comments and find some and approach the shepherds to see if they wouldn't mind my calling them out as exemplars. The second thing I would like to see done better is following up at every step. I'd like to see the shepherds collecting issues from the reviews, making sure the issues are tracked some way, whether it's through an official tracker or just the shepherds ticking things off in a spreadsheet, and having the shepherd make sure that all the comments have been dealt with. I want to see a shepherd come to me at the appropriate time, like when last call closes. I'd like to see a shepherd come to me and say, we have two issues to be addressed from the last call before the document is revised for IESG evaluation. After IESG evaluation, okay, I've got 3 changes that need to be made before you approve the document. I don't want to have to guess that, and often I do. I have to watch what's going on, watch all of it myself. That's the part I really want the shepherd to take care of. And sometimes I just have to ask, okay, I haven't really been following this very closely. I haven't really had time to follow it very closely. Tell me when it's ready for me to click the approve button. And then, of course, because that's my responsibility, I'm doing the same thing I told you before that the working group chairs have to do with the shepherd. When the shepherd tells me it's ready, I go check it and make sure I agree with that. Doesn't mean I don't trust the shepherd. It means it's my responsibility once I click that button. So I'm making sure that I approve. My name is Barry Leba, and I approve this ad. Anybody else want to comment or ask about shepherd stuff?
Challenges that I've run into as a shepherd is that you get down to one of the questions where it says, has the working group requested expert reviews in a number of different areas? And one of the challenges that I found is that there's no great direct correlation between did you ask and where should you ask. And so oftentimes it creates a dialogue between my AD and myself of, is this where I should ask, or does this apply, or is this who? And it would be great if there was a point of contact associated with that question, which said, if you're wanting to ask about this particular, XML review, syntax review, whatever, start here, and then you can work your way to an expert over here, or something like that. Otherwise, it tends to be, especially if it's areas that are completely unrelated in general with the working group's efforts, but yet we touch on it in the draft, oftentimes I'm just not familiar with who I need to talk to. And my co-chair isn't either. We just kind of stymie.
I like it when I get action items. And so this one is for me to make sure that this stuff is collected in one place. There is a page, if you go to the IESG webpage, which you can get to off of the main IETF page, there is a page for directorates. And that lists all the directorates. I need to make sure that that list tells you whom to contact for each of these. There is also a mailing list now, a mailing alias, whatever, that offhand I can't remember what it's called, but it's supposed to contact all of the review teams at once, the review team leaders, and say, we want a review of this document for these topics. Can the appropriate review teams get involved and review this? And so it's a way of not having to chase down each of the things that you want to ask for, but ask them all in one place. And that mailing list name is not publicized well, if at all. I need to make sure it is.
Dave Crocker, so you just said you want the listing of the directorates to include pointers for contacting those folks. That's over on the directorate side. And what you just said, I didn't quite hear you say, and will therefore suggest, in the Shepard's page, you want pointers over to that.
Yes. Yes. That's the action item, is making sure everything's plugged into every place so it's easy to find.
And in addition to just the list of directorates, a topic list with pointers might be helpful. So ABNF, if you've got ABNF in your document, go send a message to the APSTER. If you've got, is there a directory? Wow, okay.
But I think the ABNF list is more intended for talking about the ABNF stuff itself rather than how to use it.
I mean, but even like UTF-8. If you think your document is using UTF-8, you're probably doing it wrong. Don't ask Pete, ask someone else. But yeah, I mean, a list of topics as opposed to just directorates would probably be helpful too.
Yes.
I'm going to add to my comment here.
Oh, please.
So another thing with regards to that is, I actually, a suggestion for for chairs that I found is that it's actually beneficial as a shepherd to do that expert level review before the draft goes to working group last call. Because my experience has been that a lot of comments come back and it takes a lot of time and there's a lot to be reviewed with the working group. So one of the things we've tried to do but the reality is I didn't know this until I got to that question the first time I was shepherding a document under the new process. So that's one suggestion. My request is that what happens when you send off a request to the right people and you get nothing back? And you get crickets, so one of the questions that's come up is, how long do you wait before you say we attempted, and then we dealt with this scenario recently, and we just basically, it became this dialogue between my AD and I, and you're going to be my new AD. So, but how do we wait? How long should we wait? What should we do? Should we go to someone else? Should we try a different? And there was no good cohesive answer relative to that. It just at some point we said, well, there's a parse, good enough. But it was is this good enough for the IESG review? That's kind of the question.
I'll start at the end. Is this good enough for the IESG review? The answer to that is what your judgment is on what you think is good enough. And that's going to depend on how confident you are. If you have 3 lines of simple ABNF and you can't get anybody to review it for you, but you've copied it from something else and it looks like it's, all right, ask for somebody to take a look at it. If nobody does, you're confident enough. With any of this, I want that, so even for have all the authors confirm that they have made all the IPR disclosures and they're conformant with BCP 78 and 79. The boilerplate in the draft says that this conforms with BCP 78 and 79. And a number of people have complained, why are you asking me this stupid question? I've just submitted 20 drafts that all have the same boilerplate. Yes, I'm conforming with it. If you've got people like that in your working group and you know them and you know that they're reliable with this, you don't have to ask them. The question is, can you in good faith confirm that everything's in conformance? Your judgment. And if you want to confirm that by asking the authors, that's great, and most chairs do. If you want to say, it's Pete, I know Pete's on top of it, and you don't have to ask him, that's okay with you. It's your judgment. And the same thing with reviews. If you think if the XML is the same XML in every other document except you changed the names of 2 things, you don't need to get an XML expert to review it, perhaps, and that's your judgment. Now, if somebody comes later, and an AD who knows XML really well comes and so, or an AD who knows battery charging crap goes and looks at the battery MIB and puts this mega discuss on it, like Pete did with one. Often you get somebody who has a special expertise you never knew they had, and they come out and they say, wait, your XML is all screwed up. And you say, but I copied it from over here, and he looks at it and says, yeah, that XML is screwed up too. It happens. So a lot of this is judgment. Other questions, other comments, please? So yeah, my big message here is that we need to make sure that the resources that you guys need to do the shepherd job are readily available to you, and you don't have to go running all over the place to do it. Oh, the other part of your question was how long do you wait and how much do you bug people? Again, judgment on that, sometimes just following up with a request once or twice is enough. And you ask once and nobody does anything and you say, well, I asked. But if you ask twice, maybe you get the review. The ones you have to do, you have to bug people to respond to the reviews that have come in. You have to bug ADs who put discusses on the document to go follow up and deal with their discusses. The ones that are optional, use your judgment on whether you bug them enough and whether you can do without the review. or whether you need to find somebody else to ask. And we on the ISG are really busy, but it's also our jobs to work with you on this stuff. So don't think too much about bugging the AD if the AD isn't giving you the answers you need. More people over on the far side of the room. Anybody over there have any comments or questions? Anybody over there care? Okay. We can stare at each other for another 10 minutes, or we can all head up to Cloud 9 and get ready to go to the newcomers reception. Has this been useful for people? Hum if it's been useful. Hum if it's been useless. I feel good. Thank you, everybody.